Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Hot Mic Show. I'm Bill Whittle. And just before we close here, let's talk a little bit about the cost of this fake news. You know, sometimes people on the left will say, oh, okay, so there's press bias, a little bit of liberal press bias. What difference does it make? So what? Well, it makes a big difference. I recently finished a video. I do a firewall series of videos that try to get to the heart of some of these issues. And just released a new one today, but the one I did last was called The Truth versus CNN. And in The Truth versus CNN, I talk about what the actual harm to the country is when we get to something like fake news. So perhaps we can just look at about a minute of the close of that particular video. Now, back in 2004, Evan Thomas, the assistant managing editor of Newsweek magazine, openly stated that in the 2004 election, press bias would be worth about 15 points at the polls. And that 15 points of bias was for John Kerry, not for the Messiah Obama or Madam President, which has, of course, been far more pronounced in terms of bias. Now, here's the final 2016 election map. If we take away 15 points of media bias, take it away from Hillary Clinton, then the 2016 election map goes from this to this. In other words, this is what the country would look like if the press bias were to disappear and the American people got not conservative news, but simply unspun actual information rather than the tongue baths given to Democrats and the out-and-out lies told about Republicans. Here's the 2012 results. And then minus 15 points of media bias. And here we are again in 2008. Here's 2008 without those 15 points of bias. Do you feel harmed by this? I feel harmed by it. In order for people to govern themselves, those same people must have information upon which to base their votes. If that information is poisoned, then so is the voting, and therefore so is the country. So really, when you get right down to it, mainstream media's toxic politicizing of news is in fact the ultimate form of voter fraud. I don't know who that guy is, but he's awful good. I think I may have sent our producers an earlier version of that. I think one of the maps is slightly askew, but the fundamental point is the same. Every single one of those final maps is exactly what the country would look like without press bias. The country would vote like Kansas. That's 15 points of bias for John Kerry. It's much more than that today. It's got to be 20 or 30 points. Every single state would go red if we had a fair news media. And I'll just close by saying this. I have to say this every time I talk about press bias, and I want to be crystal clear about this. I don't want conservatively biased news because human beings are human beings. And if we had a conservatively biased news, we would fall into the same errors and the same arrogance and make the same mistakes that the left makes, because we would have this ring of invisibility on our fingers that would allow us to do whatever we want to. And that's just not good for the country. I just want fair news. I just want straight news. And if you get straight news, you get the kind of voting results we saw in those maps. That'll do it for today, and I'll do it for this week for Hot Mic right here on NRATV. We'll be back on Monday with a whole new slew of characters and horrific nightmares to discuss with you. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm Bill Whittle. This is Hot Mic here on NRATV.